Good day, folks. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. Should be a lively discussion today. This is one that's kind of near and dear to me because our immigration issue has become insane. I believe that California's position on immigration is, well, patently ridiculous. And I'm sitting here with Mayor Pro Tem for the Clovis City Council, Diane Pearce. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, Eric.
And she had an idea that maybe we should have courage and take a stand against what I consider to be bad laws. Do we define our own destiny, or does the state rule supreme? Where does the federal government fit in all that? Well, I think there's actually some rulings that have to do with that, and her idea is a non-sanctuary city. So how'd you come up with this idea?
Well, I won't take credit for it, but we saw a movement in various forms, whether it was during COVID and people wanted to be sanctuaries from the mandates or what have you. There's kind of been this concept of where do we want to separate ourselves from what else might be going on? And so once the illegal immigration situation became an absolute crisis, I think particularly people in the state of California who didn't want to be under the, as you mentioned, insane policies that we have here, including SB 54, which is our sanctuary state policy, where our law enforcement has been handcuffed from working with federal immigration authorities to get illegal aliens, criminal illegal aliens out of our communities. People realized this is bad. We knew it when it was passed, but the ramifications of it during the current crisis are just manifold. I mean, everything has been exponentially worsened. And so there's a lot of communities that have suffered from that crisis and from their lack of ability to work with the federal authorities. And they said, we don't want that anymore. That is not in the best interest of our communities. Public safety is an elected official's top priority. And so we want to separate ourselves from what the state of California is saying and doing by declaring everyone here a sanctuary state, meaning all the cities would be under sanctuary policies, and say, that's not us. We don't want that.
So first of all, what do you mean by handcuffed? What ways are they prohibited with working with ICE?
So obviously there's different levels of government that are impacted differently. The city of Clovis is impacted differently than the county of Fresno, where we also are. And the biggest problems do happen to be at the county level, and that has to do with our jail systems. It used to be that there was all kinds of communication and cooperation with various law enforcement partners and agencies through all different levels of government, whether it was state or national, federal authorities. And the biggest difference is those immigration authorities would be able to come into the secure facility of the county jail and pick up people who had ICE detainers, Immigration and Customs Enforcement.
So if they're in jail, obviously they've committed a crime.
Yes.
Or at least
they're accused. Yes.
Innocent until proven guilty.
They have encountered our justice system, and they are now in that. And that agency that says, actually, this individual crossed our border illegally. They now had a negative interaction with the justice system, and we are going to just take them, rather than the taxpayers being burdened with having to deal with them. And depending on the crime, sometimes the trial would go through and there would be an actual conviction. But more often than not, they could come in and just remove that individual who is in this country illegally, is a foreign national, and take them out of our communities.
So it made us both safer and potentially saved us money by the federal just taking over and getting rid of it.
And handling their business. But SB 54, one of the worst parts of it, said you can't do that anymore. And the biggest problem with that, of course, is it removes those interactions. It doesn't eliminate them. It doesn't mean that ICE and Border Patrol aren't going to still come after these people. It just means that they're no longer going to be able to have those encounters and apprehensions in the secure environment of a county jail system.
So they're going to have to go track them down, which is going to cost
out in our communities.
They're more money, and potentially, if they're criminals, tend to commit crimes.
They do.
On a regular basis. There's a whole recidivism idea where over and over, it's a small number of people committing most of the crimes. You turn them loose. What are they going to do?
Mm-hmm.
Go get a job?
Right. Well, yeah, I mean,
I don't think so.
It isn't in the best interest for the officers, the law enforcement agencies that are now having to pursue these people out in the general populace. And it isn't obviously the safest situation for our communities, our citizens and legal residents who are supposed to be here. Now they have to be out in the same environment where our federal immigration authorities are out hunting the bad guys who aren't supposed to be here.
So that does, by not cooperating and potentially turning them loose, you're not actually making communities safer.
Correct. I mean, I certainly don't see it that way. I think it's a much less safe environment for everyone. And when it comes to the local law enforcement, like the Clovis Police Department, they have wide-ranging cooperation with agencies, whether it's state agencies. I've, said multiple times that we cooperate all the time with state agencies when we go after people who are selling alcohol and tobacco to minors. We partner with federal agencies when we're going after drug trafficking, human trafficking. There's no problem at any time cooperating with agencies that want to go after people who are doing bad things.
So the lines of communication are there
Are
already.
absolutely open. Absolutely
Unless,
open.
I didn't mean to
No, it's all right. Unless that person that is being pursued by a federal agent is a illegal immigrant. If you are either legal immigrant or a citizen, we're going to cooperate. We're going to help whoever is after you find you and apprehend you and all of those things, unless you're illegal.
That gives us two sets of rights.
I mean,
that's a two-tier justice system, really.
I just don't understand why. And Pam Bondi, our new Attorney General, leading the Department of Justice.
Amen.
Yeah, just said the other day in referencing New York, the state of New York, and how they are pursuing cases against them, the governor, the mayor, all these different areas that are sanctuaries and have prioritized illegal immigrants, oftentimes criminal illegal immigrants, as we're talking about right now, over legal residents and citizens. And that is the real problem that we have here. We aren't talking about the people who, and it's so frustrating because someone will say, oh, well, your last name means you came from here. You should go back there. It's like, there's legal immigration. There is a prescribed and set out way for people to come here. And it often requires a lot of time, effort, sacrifice, and money to do it correctly. And I think it is incredibly disrespectful for us to set those people aside and say, hey, great on you, but we're just going to let all these people do it without having shown the respect for this country and our laws and want to be here so badly that you're willing to make those kinds of sacrifices to become an American here. I just don't understand why we just throw the doors open, say, come on in, we're going to give you all this free stuff, and be so disrespectful to the people who did right.
Well, I know if we tried to sneak into Canada or Mexico, there'd be real problems.
And
we'd be thrown in jail immediately.
Yeah, all these countries.
No seals, no.
All these countries that send people here. And I mean, that's the key too, is everybody wants to talk about, oh, well, you hate Hispanics. It's like, we're not even talking about that. There are people here from hundreds of countries that have crossed our borders illegally.
Over 200, there's a little over 250 countries.
Right.
Well over 200 are here illegally.
Yeah, and there's also ones who didn't necessarily cross the border illegally, but intentionally and knowingly overstayed visas and all kinds of other things. And
or claimed asylum when they're not actually political.
Yeah, so
they're not endangered politically in their country. They
not
just want
merely talking about people who came from Mexico. It's so difficult to have a sincere conversation when people want to muddy the waters with those kinds of things.
Well, immediately, because you disagree with somebody on the left, you're a racist.
Yes.
I mean, just it's automatic.
Yeah.
I happen to be white and male, which means I am the most evil person possible.
You are quite terrible.
That's why I have trouble looking in the mirror.
Yeah. No, and it is sad, too, because you want to have a substantive debate or conversation about these things that really do impact public safety and our communities. And I've been called every name in the book, some I hadn't even heard before. And it just, how in the world are you supposed to have a conversation and try to express your point of view, hear someone else's point of view? There's different perspectives out there. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that I have it all right and everything I think we should do about this is exactly the right way to do it. But the only way
you're darn close.
Well, of course. But the only way you're going to reach that point is with debate, dialogue, and various perspectives that can be included. And if all it is name calling and you're not going to be successful.
I have lots of friends that are first-generation Americans that came the right way. They are some of the most patriotic,
Right.
some of the people that treasure the fact that they can define their own destiny here and that they want to be part of something larger.
Right.
That is such a different perspective than people that come over illegally, and they basically want to recreate their country with better economics. They don't want to go back to their country, by the
Right.
way.
And
They just want to recreate it. There are multiple places in California that aren't really very American. They're a portion of some other culture. Now, I'm not saying their culture shouldn't be valued, but I want people, if they're going to come here, to be American first,
yeah.
not whatever other country.
Well, and that's really the point. If you want to be here, if you want to participate in the American story and find your American dream, you kind of have to have that assimilation and come in and be part of, genuinely be part of what it is that you came here for. Now, like you say, that doesn't mean you leave behind everything, because we all benefit from learning about and engaging with different aspects of various cultures. It's the beauty of the diversity of America and the diversity of California. That's not a bad word. It's just, diversity can't lead to division. Diversity should be part of a beautiful multi-everything type of community, and we can all benefit from that, but we have to have the same goal, the same trajectory, the same value set in America. That's what we're here for. We're here for America. If you're here for something else, you're in the wrong place.
Well, a whole lot of both legal citizens and illegals, it's like they're here for equity, meaning equality of results. They're against meritocracy, meaning regardless of their skin color, whoever's the most qualified should be rewarded for that hard work and that excellence.
Mm-hmm.
We still embrace that with sports, and I do think we're starting to shift, the culture shifting away from that perspective.
Absolutely.
But a whole lot of the country, they don't want to see us as America first. They don't see us as we're better than any other country. If we can define our own destiny, that means we have the freedom to figure out. And I say freedom, but I want to say maybe liberty, because with that, we forget about the responsibility part.
And I think, why is it that we've seen a shift in who's been coming here? Why is it that those people aren't interested in meritocracy? Why is it that those people aren't pursuing the same things that people used to come here for? Well, because we rang the dinner bell for them and said, hey, you don't have to do any of that. Come here and get a whole bunch of free stuff. Come here for equity. Come here for, for all this other stuff. And we're just going to give it to you if you just come here, rather than having to have skin in the game, to buy into these things, to go through that process and really make that choice to be an American citizen. Now you just get to come, have your cake and eat it too, and all of the things. And so there's no value and appreciation. I mean, we were growing up, it was always like, well, if your parents just give you a car, you won't appreciate having the car. You need to work for it. You need to pay your
Teachers hated hearing that,
right?
but they were right.
Exactly. And so that's kind of what we have here. We've just been giving cars away, and all of a sudden we don't understand why people aren't respecting their cars, appreciating their cars. Well, haven't made them.
Essentially, we're rewarding bad behavior.
Correct.
Not just with this issue. I would say in general, in California, we've rewarded bad behavior. For instance, we have homelessness, so we give more money to homelessness. We make all the money accountable. And so we waste, $24 billion.
Yeah.
And we have no idea what happened to the money. We can't do an audit on any of it. And we have a higher percentage of homeless than we had before that $24 billion.
And they told us it was a money problem.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things they tell us it's a money problem as a way to justify taking a larger portion of our earnings.
Yeah. So, they have all their pet projects, and there's only one way to fund it, and that's out of our pockets. And so we have to just keep going and keep going and keep going. And the truth is, as we've seen with so many different things, and both parties are guilty of it, particularly in Washington, is never truly wanting to solve the problem, but always wanting to use it as a political issue. And so if you were actually to do the right thing with any amount of money and actually find solutions and get progress on an issue, that's not necessarily the political thing to do.
I agree with that, but I want to point out that during Reagan, he was promised it and did an immigration deal, but he didn't make sure that the enforcement part happened first. And so we've learned that a lot of politicians that will promise something but not actually follow through. So a lot of the reason why there's not been some sort of resolution, why there hasn't been immigration reform, is because the right very much wants enforcement first. Through executive order, we might just get that through Trump.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, that's really the thing is the left wants the conversation to be about until you tell me what you're going to do with the 80-year-old grandma who crossed the border illegally 50 years ago and has been an absolutely upstanding member of the community ever since. Never jaywalked, never anything. Yeah, I mean, she's been fantastic. Until you tell me what you're going to do with her, I'm not even going to have the conversation about closing the border. I'm not going to have the conversation about the criminal illegals. They wanted this entire conversation to be had because they knew that that was going to be the sticking point. That was going to be what kept people from doing the right thing, a whole host of other things. And so fortunately, what we've seen with this new Trump administration is they said, we're not paying attention to that. You guys aren't going to be able to participate in this if that's what you want. We're closing the border. What is it? Where illegal border crossings are down like 95%.
Is it now 95? It was 93
right
a couple weeks ago.
So give or take, but somewhere in the 90 to 95% range in a matter of weeks.
But they kept saying that there's no border crisis.
Right. Our border already was closed, right? But so now we're actually going to be in a position to take headway. Tom Homan and the Department of Homeland Security are getting criminals out by the thousands, right? And so we're going to see the impacts. We're going to see some relief on this crisis, but it had to be a progressive concept where you start by closing the border, shutting it down, which apparently was easier to done than we'd been told for 4 years. And then you start dealing with the worst of the worst. And if you're following the Tom Homan or the ICE pages on social media and you're seeing some of the graphics of who it is that they have apprehended and are removing from our communities, it is crazy. It's crazy. It's not the 80-year-old grandma who's done nothing wrong but crossed the border illegally.
It's 30-year-old and younger men.
It's the worst of the worst. We're talking about rape and murder and child sex crimes and all kinds of heinous activities. And they're going in and they're getting them out. And we are all better for
it. With this non-sanctuary city idea, are you focused on just criminals? Because how it's written would matter. Or are you focused on anybody that gets in trouble with the law, we should turn them over to ICE? Because that will be a sticking point with some of the other council members if this goes through.
Mm-hmm. So my personal position is I want our law enforcement officers, our Clovis police officers, our Fresno County deputy sheriffs, whoever it might be, whatever our law enforcement officers are, I want them be able to cooperate proactively and work with any agency, but particularly these federal immigration authorities where we have been restricted from interacting and cooperating with them because of SB 54. I want the handcuffs off. I want complete cooperation, whatever that looks like. That's what I really want, because I think that is the truth of public safety and law enforcement interaction. Now, the point of that is these guys are going after the worst first. And so that's my focus right now. I want that cooperation. I want that ability to do whatever it takes to enforce those laws and have those interactions and those apprehensions happen in the safest possible manner for our communities. And I think that happens with cooperation. I'm not going to tell them what they have to do. I'm not going to tell the federal immigration authorities, I want you to use our Clovis police officers to go. That's not what they need. They need just to be unshackled, able to do their jobs in the best way that each department and agency knows how that interaction and cooperation should happen.
So you're not reinventing the wheel, you're just allowing enough freedom for our pretty agency chief.
I'm taking the off the wheel. You're right. I'm unlocking it so it can roll smoothly down the road. That's what I'd like to do.
Well, that's reasonable. I do think that some of the other council members will not want to take a stand.
They
Is sad.
had an opportunity.
It's not just disagree. It's more like, it's easier to just ignore his problem. And yet a good portion of that council, 3 of the members, were there when Clovis decided to go a different way during COVID. On May 9th, I was at that meeting. I spoke. Clovis reopened. Contrary to what Governor Newsom said we were allowed to do. So they were willing to go against the government and potentially get sued. Then, and now all of a sudden when it comes to safety, they want to sit on the sidelines. I have a problem with that.
Yeah. And that part of this kind of movement for non-sanctuary cities is we're stronger together. If enough of us are willing to take the stand, then that's going to be an impactful thing as well.
We're going to go ahead and take a break, and we'll come back to that idea in a minute. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. I want to say thank you to everybody listening on social media. Please like, and doing a great job liking. If you could also share, that matters. Even comments that are off topic, they all help the algorithm and help the show be shared. So I'm proud to say that, a year ago I was getting an average of 1,000 views, and now I'm getting an average of 2,000 views. So we're growing, and thank you. Let's go ahead and come back. And this is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. I am talking with Mayor Pro Tem of Clovis, Diane Pearce.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm enjoying the conversation.
Well, it's always good to have you on, talk with somebody that I think brings common sense to the debate.
I try.
And
it's very uncommon these days, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And then there's a whole lot of just, let somebody else handle it. I don't want to be the change. Well, if we're ever going to change the world, or at least our community, because it's probably a big step to say I'm going to change the world, but you don't have a shot if you don't change yourself, one. Mm-hmm. If you change yourself and then you move to action, you have the opportunity of changing your immediate circle, friends and family. Guess what? If you can find like-minded individuals within your friends and family circle, you can begin to change maybe your neighborhood. Your neighborhood could change what happens on the city council. It builds from there.
It does.
It all starts with the individual.
It's a ripple effect.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and I think that's, kind of going back to the non-sanctuary city conversation, that's a little bit of what we're looking for. What I would like to see Clovis do is join with other cities that have taken that step and been bold enough to say, SB 54, California's sanctuary state law, is not protecting our communities. It is handcuffing our law enforcement, and public safety is our top priority. And so we want to take a stand against what this state is trying to force on us. And so Huntington Beach was the first city to come out and have I believe theirs is a resolution, an official resolution that...
It was unanimous.
It was unanimous, 7-0 in Huntington Beach, to say, we're not playing games anymore. We're not going to go along with this state law, that there is at least legal questions remaining in how it interacts with and is in conflict with federal immigration law. And we want at least to be known, whether it's just to our community, even if it is symbolic, there is serious value in being able to say, we disagree so strongly with this, we're willing to take a stand. We're willing to step out and say, we reject that. So Huntington Beach is the first city to do that. El Cajon, down near San Diego, was another city. Our mayor, Bill Wells, brought forward a resolution to their city council. And at the first time it was brought up, it was defeated 3-2. Bill Wells only had one other vote on his council for it. And then it was shortly after that I brought the idea. I wasn't bringing a resolution or anything like that. I was merely asking my colleagues on the Clovis City Council to put the item of whether or not we could be a non-sanctuary city, wanted to be, whatever that was going to look like, on a future agenda so that we could have a full and complete hearing and discussion about it. In Clovis, individual council members are not allowed to simply place an item on the agenda. That would have been the cleanest way to do it because it would have all been kind of structured, and we'd have had department heads. Our chief of police could kind of come in and given his perspective where they are being handcuffed, what this wouldn't allow them to do based on how they have to follow state law. We could have had our city attorney weigh in and share that perspective, and the public could have weighed in at the same time this conversation was going on.
And the weight would have all been on your shoulders because you're the one that brought it forward.
Absolutely. And we could have asked questions of our staff. We could have had interactions with public comments going back and forth because an agendized item has certain freedoms in how we can discuss it because of the Brown Act, which dictates how things are done in a public setting for elected bodies. So I can't have all of my colleagues together off in a corner where nobody is and talking about something and trying to figure it out. It's supposed to be done in an open session. And if an item is agendized, that means everybody can participate because everybody knows about it, knows it's coming up, and can have a full discussion about it. So that's what I was looking for, so that there could be direct questions and conversations and debate about what the alternatives were. I mean, I'm proposing we declare ourselves a non-sanctuary city. Is that the only thing we can do? No, it's not. I think it's the right and best thing to do, but that doesn't mean those are our only options. But without it being done in that format, we weren't able to get any of that. And so all it wound up being was really just kind of unhelpful conversation and a rejection of any full and effective conversation about it. And then last week, sometime, I think it was Tuesday, El Cajon brought theirs back. They'd had a lot of public pressure, and they'd had some additional conversations and things like that. And so there'd been some minor adjustments to the wording, and they were able to pass theirs 3-2. So one person who voted against it was able to come over and say, okay, this, whatever change you made here, I'm supportive now. I've heard from the people. I understand their position. I now support this. And so we now have 2 cities that have made that declaration. And all they need is for another city or 2 or a county or someone to have that kind of boldness and courage and strength to stand up with them.
That was my point when I spoke 2 weeks ago at the Clovis City Council meeting of I've been the person that stood alone on the street corner.
Right.
It's not the same as when there's all of a sudden a unified group. Even 3 people is a much bigger deal than 1.
Absolutely.
And people all of a sudden, the public begins to perceive you differently. You're there alone, they think you're crazy. A lot of people. So I have a lot of viewers in Northern California, in a lot of those small towns. Has some connections there. Why are you not talking to your city councils that I know they're all Republican and I know they're all conservative in a lot of those little towns? Why isn't everybody going, well, I'll let somebody else do it? Part of the problem with our country is rather than taking up our civic responsibility, we've let somebody else do it. We've passed the buck. Oh, well, life is good and I just want to watch the game.
Yeah. Well, and to be fair, that comes into city councils also. I mean, I can't tell you how many times someone has tried to tell me that I should stay in my lane. It's like,
I'm betting that's somebody else on the council.
I've heard it from multiple people. But it's that idea that, look, unless it is flushing a toilet, filling a pothole, hiring a police officer, don't talk about it, don't do it, don't bring it here. That's not our lane. Our lane is this very narrow thing. And the truth of the matter is that may have been an accurate statement quarter century ago.
Well, if everything was running well, then sure.
But just look around at what has started to happen as California and our state legislature and our governor's administrations have been eroding local control. We have less and less ability to maintain our communities the way we want to, the way we see fit. And we're seeing more and more stuff leak into what it is that makes our community strong. I mean, one of the first things I brought forward, which was the first time I didn't stay in my lane, was when families and parents came to me and said, hey, we have some concerns about what's the children's section of the Clovis Library.
I was there. I'm glad you brought it forward. I went to the Clovis Library the evening before the meeting. There were books that graphically showed multiple sex positions in the Clovis Library. Now,
Yeah.
I don't know what happened to that book after I looked at it, but it wasn't in the same place.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't steal it.
Of course not. No, and though what I was told is, well, those are county libraries. And I said, yes, but these are Clovis families. These are people who have come to someone that they elected to be their representative, their voice. And I am not, and I won't be bound by what you think is all I'm allowed to talk about or do. This is something that is new to have to discuss, these transgender ideologies and all of that kind of sexualization of our children. That's not something that was around 40 years ago, even 25 years ago.
You could have got this. A 5-year-old could have reached up without a step and gotten this book.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's just unconscionable to think that someone who has put themselves out into the community and said, I would like you to trust me with your vote so that I can represent you. I can be your voice. And then you tell that person, but not on these things. You can only talk to us about these things. We want to only focus. No, that's not how it works.
Well, that's exactly how free speech works to the left.
Yeah.
You're allowed to say what you're allowed to say, and otherwise you're a racist and potentially a Nazi.
But
you could think of multiple other.
Yeah. My job is to represent those people. And if it isn't something that I have direct control over, which is like our county libraries, I can't control that. But that doesn't mean I don't get to ever say anything about it. I can go to the county. I can go to our board of supervisors, which is exactly what I did, and said, hey, there are these concerns. This is what's being brought forward. And I'm asking you to look at it and come up with a solution from the county. Again, a perfect example of why we can't be silent, why we have to be bold and take these stands is what happened with that. Our county board of supervisors was responsive, and they passed the Parents Matter Act, which said we are going to have a different section. We're not removing any books. We're not banning any books. We're just going to take these controversial, questionable books with sexual material and very mature ideologies and themes. We're going to take those out of the children's section where children have unfettered access to them, and we're going to put them in a different section where the parents control their children's exposure to it. If you're a parent and you want your kids exposed to that garbage, you can still do it, but it's going to be you, and you don't get to make sure that some other parent doesn't have the right to control their children's exposure to that. That's what this county stepped up and did. That's what we said was in the best interest of our community. What happened? The state of California said, we deny you that local control. We deny you the ability to do that, and they passed legislation to wipe it out. If more people would stand up and be bold and have that courage to say, we aren't going to take it anymore. That's how you're going to see change in Sacramento.
Isn't it Twisted Sister that does that? We're not
going
to
to take it. Yeah.
And they're dressed like cross-dressers, which is hilarious.
Yeah. But I mean, that's really what we're looking for. We're going to be stronger together. We have to come as a unified voice, and the more the merrier. But it takes that first step. It takes a group of people saying, we hear from our community. We hear what you're saying. We're your elected representatives, and we need to be responsive to what you're coming and asking us for. And right now,
not necessarily your name, what they're asking for.
Yeah, but we have to figure out how to direct that. I think a lot of times, if someone comes to me and says, hey, there's this problem in my neighborhood or whatever, my job isn't necessarily to fix that problem. My job is to get them to the person who can fix that problem. And whether that is knowing which department to direct them to in city staff, or sometimes I just it's like, hey, city manager, can you direct this person to the right place? Because we have department heads, we have assistants and deputies. I mean, there's somebody out there and I may not even know who the exact right person is. But that's my job, is to make sure that I direct the question, I direct the conversation, I direct the issue to a solution, to a resolution. And it doesn't always have to come through me. It doesn't always have to come through the city council, but it should come.
Well, that essentially the story you told about the books, that's directing it to the right level of government that could do something about it.
And it's showing my support for that effort.
Right. And it's amazing how religion and politics, I think this is, again, culture shifting. But religion and politics were like the third rail. Don't talk about them. That you were the weirdo if you dared to talk about those two things. And I think it's a mistake to not talk about them. I think that we have to stand for our beliefs and values. Now, we need to learn how to discuss things respectfully.
Of course.
There's a skill to learning to talk to somebody that disagrees with you. Something that's a work in progress with me. Nonetheless, it's a skill that I truly believe I need to develop, because the world is a better place when all of us can, in a respectful manner, have a discussion about culture, because politics will be downstream of that. As we fix problems in the culture, we have the opportunity to now fix it within politics.
Absolutely, because politics is supposed to be representative of the culture.
But it's always downstream. Culture happens first.
It needs to. It needs to. And unfortunately, what I think we're seeing is an abandonment of that kind of public square, that culture arena. And so what's filling that gap are these leftist activists who want to tell us and dictate what our culture is. It's the vocal minority that has been setting the culture. And that is why we see such a divisive politics, because that isn't really truly representative of who we are and what we want. But we've been distracted for a long time. We say all the time, Republicans or conservatives are out doing their jobs, running their businesses, raising their families, all the while, the left has been taking over the education system and all these different arenas. And so now all of a sudden we're like, oh my goodness, we've got to get back involved. We've really got to engage. We've got to be, participating in these things. And we are seeing that shift, because I think that re-engagement from the conservatives, from those with traditional values, is happening. And I think that's where you're starting to see some of that come back.
COVID was a call to action for me. As much as it was tyranny, it was a call to action. I paid attention to national. I had no idea of the power of local. Really didn't pay attention. I was a Rush Limbaugh fan in high school when he was still in Sacramento. I was driving to Rio Linda with a little side business I had to sell some chickens. And my little vehicle had nothing but an AM radio. And I happened to stumble on Rush Limbaugh, and I'm like, this sounds like my mom's family.
Yeah.
My dad's family were FDR Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
So I was always stuck in this argument and didn't hesitate to speak up. I had no idea that it would lead me here.
Right.
Like, that was the foundation that allowed me the first time I was invited on a show to go, oh, okay, I guess I could.
I should talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my story, I think, represents a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Take the first step.
Yeah.
Get to know your local elected. Doesn't matter whether it's school board, if that's your interest, city council, board of supervisors. If you know who they are and you develop a relationship, even if you disagree, they would hear you out in most cases. There are a few that are just unfair, fake people, but most of them would hear you out. You would have a voice at the table. If the only time you ever show up is to yell at them, how well are they going to take that? Think about that. If the only time you saw your neighbor was when he came over and yelled at you, even if he was completely right, what would you be inclined to do? Tune him out and want him to go away.
Yeah.
But if you had a relationship, maybe he wouldn't have to yell and you could have worked out something.
Mm-hmm. No, it's absolutely true. And there's so much that goes on. And I think what COVID really started it too, whether it was with the schools and going online and parents all of a sudden realizing, oh my goodness, this is not reading, writing, and arithmetic. There's so much more going on here. And they, again, re-engaged and had to take back over. And we've seen the shifts of where our schools are now. But it happens too when you're realizing, I don't know that this body, these people I've been electing, just because I recognize the name on the ballot every time, I'm not sure they really do represent me. I don't know that they really are my voice. All of a sudden, people started thinking, I want someone who speaks for me. And the interesting thing, I'm not saying I necessarily agree with it, but there were some polls that were done leading up to this most recent election, kind of between 22 and 24, that were asking people, are you more interested in a candidate who will get the things done that you want done? Or are you more interested in a candidate who's going to say the things that you want said? And interestingly enough, people wanted the things said more than they wanted the things done. Now, again, I'm not saying that's the best situation to have, but it is a reality, because that's where people really felt left behind, was who's speaking? I mean, look what happened when Donald Trump came down that escalator in 2015. I mean, people were saying, he's saying everything that I have been thinking and was afraid to say. And so it was kind of that phenomenon and that shift where people were like, I want to hear what it is that I'm thinking and I'm feeling. And that is my representation, is that voice in the public arena. And that's been missing, but we're starting to see that come back. And I think that's where you see different elected officials kind of take that podium and run with it.
Do we really have free speech if you're afraid to say it?
Right?
If you're afraid to say it, that means that you're self-censoring.
Yeah.
You're eliminating your right to free speech.
For how long were people afraid to state the fact that there are only two genders? You were going to get vilified for that type of thing. People afraid to say, you know what? Don't want criminal illegal aliens in my community. Oh my gosh, you're racist. What is wrong with you? But now we're starting to see people find that freedom again.
Well, it is truly a blessing that culture has shifted. For me, it's like this huge burden has been lifted off of my shoulders. Like there's work still to be done, a lot of work. But now with hope, everything shifted, perspective shifted. We're going to go ahead and take our last break. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. So we're technically off the radio, though we're still live. If we went live on Rumble, I'm not quite sure what happened today. We've had some technical issues. Nonetheless, I want to go over the sanctuary city, your vision for it one more time, and how people could get involved if they believe, or frankly, if they don't believe.
Absolutely.
In your perspective, how can we bring this to the city council? Let's go ahead and come back. And this is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. I am joined by Mayor Pro Tem Diane Pearce of the Clovis City Council. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So as you know, I like to not just spend a bunch of time complaining. There's so much to complain about always.
That's the easy part, right?
The easy part. I like to focus on how do we turn the problem into a solution? How do we take it to action? So kind of generally redefine what your idea was, and then how do you bring it to action?
Yeah, so I've been making sure that people understand we can't do nothing. The conversation is continuing, and there's multiple paths forward. At the Clovis City Council level, my proposal to put it on a future agenda was rejected. I received zero support for that. But that doesn't mean that couldn't come back, that I couldn't re-ask for that. I think what would be required for that is for a couple of my colleagues to have conversations, like you say, have the conversations with people to understand where things are coming from. In the last week or so, in some ways, things have gotten more difficult. In some ways, I think there's a little more openness to some of the concepts of the benefit of just having the discussion as an agenda item. Again, kind of allowing our chief of police to come in and be part of the conversation where we can ask questions and have a better, clearer understanding of how these things impact our police department. Our city attorney can participate in that conversation. So there may be some openness there. And if people are still wanting that to happen, they need to make their voice heard. And
I will reach out to a couple council members. What said yourself?
That's the best way to do it. It takes 3 on our 5-member council to agree and have consensus to put something on the agenda. So we need 2 more. I'm there. So we need 2 more. And the best way to do that is just to reach out to them directly. Some of them are on Facebook, on social media, but on the cityofclovis.com website, you can go to the city council page from the government tab, administration, city council, and you can find access to all of the email addresses. You can reach out to them directly and let them know your position, whatever it is. Because that's one of my things is public engagement doesn't have to agree with me. I was voted into this seat. It is a public service seat, and I welcome the public to tell me what they think, whether they agree with me or not. At the beginning of every city council meeting, we have public comments for people to come and address us on issues that aren't on our agenda. And so that's where people have come to address this non-sanctuary city
So wait,
proposal.
you could show up at you need to
Show up
and you could speak at the
and
beginning of the meeting
to your council members. You can
on
address your
any issue you wanted. Now, hopefully, you're polite and respectful.
we would request that. So you can come and address your elected representatives on anything. And so that is something that is open to people. Come and let us know. At the 2 weeks ago, when I was first bringing this proposal forward, there was a number of people who came to speak in support of it, including yourself. And there was a handful of people who spoke against it.
7-3.
I think
7-4-3 against.
And there were a number of written comments. I think there was a total of 14. And I think that was probably 10-4 in support of it. And then my proposal was rejected. But then last week, there were more people who came. And I think that was like 5-1 against. But the point is, that is everyone's right to come and address their elected body. You don't have to agree with me. I'm going to hear you out because that's my job. I'm here to represent you, whether you agree with me, I agree with you, there's still a representation can happen. And I'm going to listen to all of that. And I want that to be part of the conversation. That's part of why I want it on the agenda, because what's happening now is those public comments are at the beginning of the meeting, and we can't have interaction on those because it's not an agendized item. We just hear from you.
Right.
And then it isn't until the end of the meeting, which has been hours later.
Sometimes many hours.
Right. Where the council members have what we call council comments. And then we can address some of those things and reference things that have been mentioned. And so it's a very disjointed thing. Most of the time, the public comes at the front end, isn't going to sit through the 3 hours of stuff that we're going to be talking about to hear what we
I don't even always say all the time.
Right at the end. And so there's a disconnect between how this conversation is happening. And because we're not having it in the council chambers, it's really been relegated to social media. And that is not an appropriate or effective place for this to be going on, because we know what social media does.
Look, even in council chambers, when you brought in the other issue, the one about inappropriate books, a whole bunch of the people that came in and spoke and claimed book banning were not from Clovis.
Mm-hmm. And that's
and now they still have the right to do that
too.
But I want to point out, didn't really represent Clovis residents, as opposed to I think there were 22 people that spoke in favor of it. 4 of them are Fresno residents, and everybody else I know was a Clovis resident because I know them personally. I know, like in many cases, I've been to their house.
Yeah.
It's interesting how left is great at mobilizing people to come and speak on an issue, and they will literally bust them in. In some cases, they'll pay in to be there.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to lose if we don't actually show up. We have this issue with the Board of Supervisors, and unfortunately, they only have a meeting at 10 a.m., basically 3 times a month on Tuesdays. They never have anything in the evening, so people have to take off time from their jobs or have a job that has enough flexibility to get there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so glad that Clovis is in the evening, where it's a little easier for the average person to get there.
No, and that's fair too. And some of that just has to do with size of the jurisdiction, the amount of type, the agenda itself. Clovis is still a smaller city. And so what we have, kind of the scope of what we're looking at allows us to have an evening meeting. Again, sometimes they go quite long, but you look at a city the size of Fresno, and their meetings are also 9 a.m., but they often go all day. So that plays into it too. And people have to figure out how they're going to engage and interact. And you can watch online. You don't have to be present in the council chambers to hear and see what's going on. And that's true for public comment. Also, you don't have to show up in person. You can email in public comments. You can just email your elected representatives. So there's multiple ways for people to engage. And the other thing on this specific topic is the Clovis City Council isn't the only elected body that has an opportunity to participate in this discussion, because the Fresno County Board of Supervisors also has an interest in this, because they do oversee the county jail system where this is most impactful. And so there's other ways to go about this. If we are going to continue to pursue any kind of concept of separating ourselves from the disastrous sanctuary state policies that Sacramento is forcing on us, and we want to say whether it's we just are not a sanctuary city, we're rejecting those policies, if we want a formal thing of we are a non-sanctuaries, whatever that is, this is a movement that needs to push back on dangerous policies coming out of Sacramento that are having direct negative impacts our community. In December, we had an illegal alien living in Clovis who was at fault in a DUI crash that killed a Coarse-Gold woman and a Clovis man. He's currently in the Fresno County Jail with an INS detainer on him. That's how we know he's not supposed to be here. So don't act like it isn't happening in Clovis. Don't act like it isn't a problem in Clovis, that it doesn't happen in Fresno County. These things are everywhere because of the absolute crisis that was created over the last 4 years. We are making significant headway immediately. There's still a lot to be done. It can be done at the county level. It can be done at the city level, but make your voice heard.
Amen to that. I wish I saw more people regularly. Most of the people I see that come to the Clovis City Council meeting, they're involved in government. They're heads of departments.
Sure.
They generally, not always, outnumber, except when there's a contentious issue, the number of citizens that are there to make their voices heard and take part in government.
Yeah.
Take a friend. Go to one. Try it.
Yeah.
VDs are available. If you want the liberty, you have a responsibility.
It's absolutely true.
Well, Diane, I thank you for this time.
Eric, thanks for having me.
Oh, always a pleasure. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. Go out there and make a difference, folks.